and welcome to the OHIO podcast. I am the wild man, Chris Wilds. I am joined by my sidekick for today, Buckeye Boggs, as he's letting me take the reins on the studio today. And we are going to be doing our announcement of our first ever OHIO podcast, all Big Ten teams. And we're going to do a first team and a second team, Eric.
Yes.
And we base this on our compilations. For those of you who've been watching our rankings for the course of about the last 2 months now, we have come up with top 10 lists of the 10 best players at each position in the Big Ten. So that is how we came to these decisions as far as our first and second team. And Eric, if you are ready, we will jump right in.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this, Chris. I feel confident that our list is one of the better ones you're going to see out there.
Yes.
Number one. And the reason being is I believe we take into account several things, Chris.
Right.
Last year's stats, overall team depth, team rankings as far as how many blue chips are on there, just, all of those things. So what you've done, what you're ranked as far as, who you are as a player, and then how we project you. And so when you take all that into account, including our biases, which we all have them, the collaboration of yourself, myself, and JR, I am fairly confident that we are going to make people mad, but I think we're dead on.
Yeah, I agree. We are I think pretty good. As we look back through that process, Eric, we didn't always agree on who belonged where on these lists. So I think that as you said, compiling our picks together gives us a pretty accurate read of where we should be. Now, that being said, let's jump in. We're going to start out with second team defense, Eric. And here we go. So at defensive end from that team up north, we have Josiah Stewart. At the other defensive end from Penn State, Abdul Carter. Defensive tackle from Michigan, Kenneth Grant. And at the other defensive tackle from Indiana, James Carpenter. Moving to linebacker, Jeffrey Bassa from Oregon. Eric, that guy's a complete stud. He is very good.
It makes no sense that he would be second string until you see who's first team.
On the other side, and this one just boggles my mind, Derek, but Dominic DeLuca from Penn State. That's a JR thing.
He's probably pumped to see that.
At cornerback from Michigan, Will Johnson. That's going to raise some eyebrows right there, Eric. But if you go back and watch our position preview shows, you'll understand why. At the other cornerback from Ohio State, Davison Igbinosun. At safety, again, how this guy's not in the top two, you just got to wonder. Safety, Hunter Wohler from Wisconsin. The other safety from Penn State, Kevin Winston Jr. And the final safety cornerback from Ohio State, Lathan Ransom. So, Eric, that is our second team, all Big Ten defense. What are your thoughts?
So let me do one thing of clarification. So you'll see Stewart has defensive end / linebacker on that. Kind of that hybrid stand-up linebacker, defensive end position for him. He comes in one of those guys where he can play both.
Yes.
And so I took that into account. Same thing with Lathan Ransom, safety cornerback. He is the safety corner for Ohio State.
He's the nickel guy.
Yeah, he's the nickel. So it made sense to kind of put those positions in there. And then you'll notice that sometimes we'll have, like in the offense, first string has got two running backs, or first team's got two running backs, but only two wide receivers. And then we flipped it around Second string's got 1 running back, 3 wide receivers, and it has to do with who had more votes. So
Yes.
that's why you're seeing a little bit of that, because it was all about the number of votes and who they are in the position they play. And we tried to be very specific on what position they actually are playing, including offensive line. We took that into account as well. So we actually have tackles, guards, and centers. But my first initial reaction, without being understanding what's to come, is that that's a lot of Michigan and Penn State guys on the second team defense. That's my initial reaction.
One, as we see the first team, I think you'll see why.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
I also know that Will Johnson is probably the most. I think Michigan fans are going to hate that. They worship at the feet of Will Johnson. They think
Yes.
he is one of the best players in all of college football. It's just not true.
No.
Look at the stats. It's just not true. He had the football thrown his way much more than some of the other guys in the Big Ten. And when he did, although he does have really nice, he had some really big interceptions, he allowed way too many receptions, in my opinion, to be first string.
Yeah.
To be first team, sorry.
And I know it may be a controversial take, Eric, and I justified this in our preview show, but it's hard for me to give somebody first team honors who you really don't know what they're capable of when they don't know the other team's offensive plays.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's that simple. Okay, so that's the second team defense. Now, the first team the second team OHIO podcast, all Big Ten offensive team. Are we ready, Eric? We have quarterback Will Howard from Ohio State. Running back Kyle Monangai, the best name in all of college football. From Rutgers, at wide receiver, Daniel Jackson from Minnesota, very good receiver. Will Pauling from Wisconsin is our second wide receiver. Eric, you did this to me on purpose, I'm sure. Wide receiver Jeremiah Smith comes in as the third wide receiver on this list.
He's not caught one pass in college football, and he's on our second team offense. That is just because of you, Chris, I might add.
Well, that's just because Jeremiah Smith is that dang good, Eric.
Oh, okay.
But you know what? One thing we can't agree on is Luke Lachey is on this list. Tight end from Iowa. Amazing talent. Then we get to the offensive line. Offensive tackles, Riley Mailman from Wisconsin and J.C. Davis from Illinois. Offensive guard, Matthew Bedford, who is now at Oregon, previously of Indiana. Offensive tackle / guard, Josh Connerly of Oregon. And center, Seth McLaughlin from Ohio State. So, Eric, that is our second team offense. What are your thoughts there?
So, it's really good offense. Like, if you are, I think that just about any coach in college football would look at that and say, if that's my starting lineup, I'm going to go win a lot of football games there.
Yeah.
And that's just the second team. Kyle Monangai from Rutgers.
A beast.
I think he should be first team. But when you find out why he's not, you'll understand. But yeah, looking at this, taking the second team into account, Ohio State had 5 players, and then you had 4 teams with 3 players: Oregon, Michigan, Penn State, and Wisconsin. Very familiar teams to the Big Ten outside of Oregon. Missing from this list in the second team so far, USC, UCLA, and Washington. So, um, interesting. There's some interesting things here, but we already see a theme from the second team taking shape. When we look at the first team, all Big Ten, I think it's going to be very clear who the best teams in the Big Ten are.
I agree, Eric. So let's go ahead and start out by taking a look at that first team defense. And there we go. At one defensive end, you have Jack Sawyer from The Ohio State University. At the other defensive end, you've got JT Tuimoloau from The Ohio State University. Another Buckeye comes in at defensive tackle, Tyleek Williams. And then the lone Michigan guy on this first team defense, Mason Graham from Michigan. Then we move over to the linebackers, and wow, there's a theme going on here, Eric. Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson, both of Iowa. Then we have Muhammad Toure of Rutgers. And then the defensive backs, cornerback Denzel Burke from Ohio State, cornerback Jabir Muhammad from Oregon, safety Caleb Downs from Ohio State, and safety Dylan Thieneman from Purdue. Eric, that is a stacked defense. And you know what? Nearly half of it resides in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah.
That, I think, is very telling about what we could see this season.
Here's the thing about that, right? You're going to have people who watch this video who aren't Ohio State fans who are going to say, you guys are completely biased. It is not. It is not. I promise you, there's very little bias in this list. That's just how good Ohio State is going to be defensively this year. It is a national championship caliber defense. It is,
Yes.
flat out. The only question will be, will there be enough offensive juice to get enough points to win a national championship? Because the defense is going to keep them in every single game. I promise you that.
Yeah, let's talk about that offensive juice, Eric. With the first team all Big Ten offense, it all starts with quarterback Dylan Gabriel from Oregon. Then we go to the running backs. Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, both of Ohio State, lead the running back crew. Wide receiver Emeka Egbuka, also from Ohio State. Wide receiver Tez Johnson of Oregon. And do not sleep on this guy, Eric. He is legit. Tight end Colston Loveland from Michigan. And then we go to the offensive line, and who I think is one of the best offensive tackles in the country, and a Johnny Cornelius from Oregon. The other offensive tackle is Ariante Ursery from Minnesota. We have guard Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, guard Tyler Cooper of Minnesota, and finally center Jonah Monheim from UCLA.
USC.
Oh, I'm sorry, USC. Thank you. USC, and that is our all Big Ten first team offense. Eric, your thoughts?
There's going to be enough juice there. There's the proof is in the pudding, right? Oregon and Ohio State lead the pack here on offense. There's no doubt. The other thing that jumps out is Minnesota they're the only team with 2 offensive linemen in the first team first team offense. So Minnesota is going to be able to do some things running the football. And given what they have, that is a dangerous football team. It is a football team people need to watch out for. Rutgers is the other one that people need to watch out for. Here's what also is very interesting. You ready for this? 0 first-team defense, 0 first-team offense players in Penn State.
Yeah. Very, very telling. Very telling. And this is a team, Eric, that most people think is among the top 3 in the conference. And I'm here to tell you, I don't think they are. I really don't. I think this is a team that could slip to as low as fifth or sixth in the conference this year. When you look at what we have, I mean, we talked about Rutgers a little bit. You mentioned them. Very favorable schedule and a running back in Kyle Monangai and a quarterback who can finally throw the ball. Good defensive coach in Tony Schiano. Rutgers is going to be a team on the move. There are several others. Iowa, that defense is always legit. If they can generate any offense at all, they're going to be in the mix given their schedule. I don't know that Penn State is a top 5 team in the conference. We know this much, though. Barring injury, Ohio State and Oregon are on a collision course for multiple meetings this year.
Yep. And I think the first and second team numbers
reflect that.
They reflect that. So I just did some quick math while we were doing this. I added up all the players selected in both the first and second teams on offense and defense. And coming in at first was obviously Ohio State with 14.
14 of the 22 starter. Well, that's both teams, so.
Now.
Yes, they're 14 of 44, yeah.
But 2 of them are at running back. I've had an issue with that since our very first player.
I don't know that that's that far-fetched, Eric.
I understand it's not that far-fetched, but two does not equal 1. You know what I mean? It does, but if you're going to do that, then you should say Ohio State running back room, and here's the other player. You know what I mean? That's why I was saying Monangai should be first team, in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. All right. Coming in second, so you had 14, then we dropped down to 7. That's Oregon. Oregon came in second with 7. Would you like to take a guess who was third without just in reflecting in your memory of what we saw?
I'm going to take a stab at Minnesota.
Incorrect. It was actually Michigan.
They had a lot of second-team guys.
They had 5. They had 5 guys. So they're only 2 behind Oregon, way behind Ohio State, but that's interesting to me. The cupboard's not bare for Sherrone Moore. But like we've been saying, what's behind those guys?
Yeah.
Very little. And most of them are defensive guys.
Yeah, this is a team that's a team that defensively is going to be legit if their starters can hold up. But how much can their starters play?
Yeah.
You don't have a rotation there, Eric, like these other teams do.
there's a world where Michigan's going to lose a lot of close games in the fourth quarter because their defense is
they're gassed. Yeah.
Gassed. And they're going to try to do this the exact same way they did last year, Chris. Phenomenal defense, and they're going to try to run the football. But they're replacing all 5 starters on the offensive line. 0 Michigan guys in the first and second team offensive line. This is last year's Michigan offensive line. It's Minnesota.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. Speaking of Minnesota, they, along with 3 other teams in the Big Ten, came in 4th with 3 guys each. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Penn State. I've been preaching this for a while. Penn State they might not have the kind of year that they normally have. 9-10 wins. I think they're looking at more closer to 9-8, maybe even 7. And if that's the case, James Franklin might be in trouble. They do have a little bit of a favorable schedule, but if they lose that game over there on country roads to start the season, watch out. Wisconsin at 3, the same number as Iowa and Minnesota. If this is the old Big Ten West, that is going to be a knockdown, drag out. They're going to beat each other up type of thing. So watch that. Rutgers comes in at 2. So they actually came in 8th with 2 guys. They're the only other team that have 2. And then the teams with only 1 player was Indiana, Illinois, Purdue, and USC. Interestingly enough, Washington had 0, and I think Washington actually has a little bit better of a roster than I anticipated them having, given the turnover in coaching and the turnover with the transfer portal. but they didn't have anybody in the first and second team All Big Ten OHIO podcast rankings. So that's interesting to me. I think USC, Washington, and definitely UCLA, I think are about to find out the Big Ten is not the Pac-12.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And Eric, you talked about a team like Rutgers that only had two guys. Don't let that dissuade you from realizing just how good that team is.
Sure.
Just because they didn't have guys that made that top four players on the list, so to speak, to get into the top two as far as the offensive and defensive first and second teams, doesn't mean that they didn't have a whole lot of guys at number 5.
Right.
This is a balanced team. It's a smart team. They've got a lot of advantages they haven't had in the past, including that schedule. But I mean, a lot of upgrades at player positions that I think really, this is a team that's poised to rise. Something I found interesting, and I think some people are still somewhat high on this team, is Maryland. We didn't even talk about Maryland players in any discussion that I can really remember.
Maryland's best player that is transferred to Michigan at linebacker, I think, is kind
Yes,
of
yes,
what we discovered there. I think Maryland is going to take a massive, massive hit this year. Um, I couldn't agree with you more. The other thing that was interesting to me is how many of those players that we talked about from Indiana who came over from G5 schools who were in the top 10, they were at 8, 9, 10, depending on where they fell. They didn't make the first and second team, but if there was a third team, I think Indiana would have probably the majority of
a
them.
lot of it. Yeah,
So that's another team to keep your eye on. But I think Indiana is going to surprise some people. But when it comes to the big games, they're going to get absolutely spanked.
yeah,
So this is what I'm coming away with from this exercise that's taken us 2 months to do. Ohio State has got the best roster money can buy, man. A lot of these guys that are in the first and second team came back
yes,
and or transferred in.
yes,
Okay. You got Quinshon Judkins, you've got Caleb Downs, you got Will Howard. 3 of those 14 guys were transfers. Let's see how many I can name right off the top of my head that was on this list that came back. Jack Sawyer,
yes.
JT Tuamulau, who was at cornerback?
Denzel Burke.
Denzel Burke.
I mean, you could also
Donovan
even say
Jackson.
Iggy was in that list because he would have been a late draft pick, but I think he could have been he would have been drafted.
All right. Donovan Jackson.
Tyreek.
Tyreek. Okay. So there's 5. The other ones like Lathan Ransom and things, I think they would have been back. There's 5 to be added to the other 3. That's 8. That's 8 out of the 14 guys who there is a chance they wouldn't have been on this list, either because they went to the draft or they would have went to another school or they would have stayed.
Do you want to go with 9, Eric? Let's remember how close that was for Jeremiah Smith.
That's a good point. Emeka Egbuka.
Emeka.
Forget Emeka. So that's 10. This list would have looked very different if Ohio State wouldn't have won the offseason. And, I know those are cliches that are exactly what they are. They're just cliches, winning the offseason. Trust me, those players, the coaches over at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, and this fan base don't want to claim a offseason national championship. They want to win the season. They want to claim a national championship. But before you can do that, you do have to win the offseason. And that is what they have done. So step 1 is complete. Step 1 is complete. Looking at the other rosters, it is plainly obvious to me that the big games are Oregon and Michigan. Some would say going into Happy Valley and playing Penn State. I don't. I would say you can make an argument that the game against Iowa is just as critical as Penn State. The only difference is Iowa's got to come to Columbus, where Ohio State has to go to Penn State. So those are kind of some of the things I've looked at and what this revealed to me with Ohio State, and I'm super excited, man. We're almost there. We're 1 month away.
Yes.
We're 1 month of the way. We've got what we've shown here, what we have in our first and second team. I'm really interested to find out how close our list is. I haven't compared it to like the media or the coaches or any of those things yet. There will be some differences. I understand that, but I think that these lists are going to be pretty much dead on,
Because we are just that good.
barring injuries, of course.
Barring injuries, and I'm with you, Eric. I can't wait. We are only, as we record this, about a day and a half out from the start of fall camp. And that's really the kickoff. That's when it all begins. So we hope you enjoyed this video. Please go into the comments. Let us know what you thought. Did we get it right? Did we get it wrong? Make your argument. We love to hear from you. And as always, make sure you go on, like, subscribe. Hey, if you love us, come and join the podcast. It's only $3.99 a month to become an actual member, and you get all kinds of great perks, such as our members-only T-shirts sent out to you 30 days after you have become a member, free shipping at our online store, not to mention tons of great content, Eric. Tons of great content. We do a lot of giveaways for our members, so yeah, lots of perks to becoming a member, and only $3.99 a month. What a deal. So, if you've got nothing else, Eric, until next time, OH.
IO.
Go Bucks.